groovy.
C'est tout.
Let's kick it, buddy.
Kick it. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this special episode of Frivolous Gravitas, where we further endeavor to help me to lose my voice permanently. No, this is actually a Christmas episode. So Merry Christmas to all of you who are watching. And
Happy Hanukkah.
Have a crazy Kwanzaa. I don't know any of the other Christmas holidays. I don't know.
Well, Chinese New Year's coming up. We'll just say Happy Chinese New Year too.
And I guess this occurs well into the Ukrainian Christmas as well, so it all applies. But as with the the wheel of the season, we decided that, well, what can we do to keep the festive the festivities going, and how can we take part of it and maybe give back a bit? And we thought we'd give you guys our recommendations, because you guys probably need something to read or to listen to on that long car ride across Canada, which it's a large country. You're probably going to want something to listen to, an audiobook, some music, something to drone out your in-laws, or maybe just something to pass the time while you didn't realize how much time there was when you're not at work. Either way,
a vessel for escapism.
Yes.
If you need to ditch the holiday crowd and just sit in a dank room somewhere.
Yeah.
Cuddle up to a light.
So we're going to be giving you our kind of maybe rapid lightning round, not too long recommendations on certain things that we enjoy and that we think would bring joy to you as well. So let's start with books.
Yeah, let's start with books.
All right, so let's keep it down. Maybe no more than 5 minutes for each book.
Yeah, okay. I'm actually gonna one up you. I'm gonna do 60 seconds, but I'm gonna do 5 books for each 60 seconds.
Okay, I've got a bunch of different books of different stuff. They're all just lying around here. You can see a couple of them on the table. But all right, who wants to start? You want to go?
How do you want to structure it? Do you want to just do tit for tat? One.
That'll be good.
Okay. Well, I'll start with some of the stuff that we've recommended a lot on the show before. So, where do I start? Okay, Alan Watts, Being in the Way, and the Philosophy of Tao. Those are 2 books.
Well, they're 2.
Why I put it.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry. One of the reasons I put it at the top of my list, though, is because I think it's a supremely influential book, and it's or books, and they're perfectly accessible to absolutely everybody. So a lot of my books are going to be geared towards math nerds or programmers or philosophers or quantum physicists and a bunch of nonfiction stuff that not everybody's into. But specifically, Alan Watts is approachable to absolutely anybody from any creed, any background, any age. Perfectly accessible. So Alan Watts is my number 1.
I always find Alan Watts is a good foil, because he's not just a hippie. Well, he is a hippie, but
he's totally a hippie. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's one of those guys that if you're listening to very objective guys and very if you're listening to, he's a nice break, and he asks the right questions in the right way that the hippie movement was supposed to be doing, and not just sitting around getting high. This and he's still funny.
This does really relate to actually one of my recommendations, though. So there's going to be a couple hippies in here, even though I'm, if you know me, you're going to be like, Jordan, don't be so hard on the hippies. It's no. All right, I guess my turn.
Yeah, your go.
All right, so I guess I'll start with the hippies then. My recommendation, if you want something weird, Tom Wolfe's The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. This had quite an effect on me, but don't take my word for it. It's kind of an expose on the acid movement in the mid to late 60s, well, really mid 60s, where Tom Wolfe followed around a bunch of guys from Berkeley, and they on the Kinsey bus. Kinsey is the guy who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. With that movie with Jack Nicholson, I think is it in it, and he followed them around, and Kinsey's attempt to open people's minds and to internally fail it. But if you want to understand the mind of hippies or is just jug culture in general. This is a great book, and there's more to it than just suffering and depression. There's a definite mentality, and there was something of the time that people were experimenting with consciousness and different modes of being. None of it really worked, but it was an experiment that people did in America that had a huge effect on the way America turned out after. So this really is quite the expose, and Tom Wolfe is one of the best writers ever. I can't recommend Tom Wolfe enough. If you want something a little more grounded in realism, maybe The Right Stuff, which is about the space program, where he follows around like the Gemini 7 astronauts and how they got selected. So that's mine. Definitely give it a go.
Cool.
I'm not a drug guy, and this made me open my mind a bit. Kind of not as much as Alan Watts would.
You're dragging on. You're dragging on.
Yeah. We said 5 minutes. Okay, your turn.
Okay.
Put this in the done pile.
Well, then I get to do 5 in a row if you're going to do 5 minutes on one.
Okay, well, I was in 5 minutes. Ho.
John Searle, anything by John Searle, but especially his philosophy. But he was also a social activist and political activist, and he did a lot of work on like ontological studies and sciences of like knowledge and epistemology and things like that. But he was a big advocate for the free speech movement. And he was really good at communicating with his critics as well. So he exemplified a good, what do you call that? Like, not scientist, but yeah, he was a good scientist, but a good debater or whatever. Like,
how do you spell his name?
Searle. John
okay, I
Searle.
typed his name and I got a hockey player. SEA. Surreal. Okay.
But he does even some work on like the China room or whatever, like building a robot and AI, conceptualizing artificial intelligence, and if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's a duck, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So he talks a lot about existentialism, but from a scientific and quantum approach, like through computing or through math or whatever. But it's not math heavy. He's very much philosophical in nature, so he approaches things in a very discussable way. He relates things to everybody, so I think it's an awesome approach for anyone, because most people don't get into that type of book, and I think it's really important that we do, at least at some point in our lives, consider existentialism, like seriously.
I have to read this now. Apparently he had a long-running polite feud with Jacques Derrida, so now he's on my good he's not on the naughty list. Derrida's always been on the naughty list.
Yeah, the rediscovery of the mind is probably the best one I would suggest.
Okay, I'm gonna put that one on my list. Thank you, Kris.
It's that or Intentionality. Those are my 2 books.
Okay, my turn. Since we're still in philosophy,
I'm just gonna shut my HVAC off 1 second.
Yeah. Now that Kris is gone, we can talk about bad things. We can say all the mean things that Kris won't let us say while I'm on screen. He keeps me hostage in here,
Sorry, I'm not even listening.
It's okay. You'll see it when you're editing. All right. I guess to keep on with what we're talking about, if I'll get into kind of a harder book, but it's some a fundamental one. Maybe it's definitely one you can like, I don't know, everyone says. So I'm just going to go with A History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. If you're looking to start somewhere, start here. Downside, it's thick. Upside, it's broken into discrete chapters that are chronologically, so it goes from the Greeks to the early 20th century, and he discusses them by philosopher. So, Pythagoras gets his own thing. So if you want to look it up, you can always what did John the Scot say? What's Stoicism? He doesn't like Stoicism. Thinks it's just sour grapes. And I was just like, why? And that got me thinking a lot. But this one was a good introduction. It's a good place to start. It's more
introduction.
Yeah, honestly, it's probably the best introduction if you're looking to get a global view of philosophy and the whole thought process of it. this is probably one of the better places to start. And
that one actually has an awesome audiobook narration.
Yes.
Sometimes you get some really bad quality narrations, or they truncate a whole bunch, or what do you call that?
They abridge it.
Abridge it, yeah.
And not in the fun way like Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. But no, that one's got a supremely good audiobook for it if you hunt around.
Yeah. You can find it on the internet pretty easily. All right, Chris's turn.
Up next, I would suggest, if you want to just skipping off or piggybacking off of Bertrand Russell there, I might suggest A Historian's Delight in the title of Imperial Twilight by Stephen R. Platt. That book it's not my cup of tea, but it was an awesome portrayal of the British colonial era and leading up to the Opium Wars. But if you really want to get an understanding for China and Chinese politics, even of today, reading the history of the relationship with the West from this really in-depth, and I don't want to say it's just long for no reason. It's written concisely, but it's just long because there's a lot of detail to it. It's a phenomenal historical account, I should say, of the events leading up to the Opium Wars. Well, the first Opium War. I don't think it even gets into the second one very much.
I'm gonna have
the whole kowtow thing. Like, he explains it for like 4 hours. You're sitting there understanding the background of what kowtow means. Like, it's really well done.
I think this one's on my list now. So
it should be. Absolutely. For you would love this one. This should be at the top.
I've been looking for more history. Actually, yeah, coming off of that, history books from me, because I've got, like, this is all history. Most of that is history. And stuff behind me is a lot of history. I read a lot of history. But one of my favorite parts of history is World War II, because it's just so interesting. And one of the best histories of World War II that really actually solidified it, and I've talked about it a lot on the channel, is the Third Reich trilogy by Richard J. Evans. I read it, I think, last winter. Just blew through it. It was fascinating. It starts with the coming of the Reich, and then, which is, the political stuff that was happening in Weimar Germany. And the second book is the Third Reich in power, the 30s, what they were doing to consolidate their power and all the lies they were telling. And the Third Reich at War, which is this one, which is the only one I've found so far, is really about what the Third Reich did and how it, falls. So it's a lot, kind of comes off of, reads a bit like Edward Gibbon's, except better written, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. But it really dispels a lot of those myths of the Third Reich, like, they were actually a good system. Well, you got the trains to run on time. It's like, no, all of this was lies, and here's why the lies happened. Here's how he told them. And one of the things he does use is primary source material of people a lot that were there. He relies heavily on firsthand accounts, which
like
is
letters or interviews or
letters, stuff like William Shire, this book, Berlin Diary, the red one there, which is also good, but that's like correspondence that were there, survivors, notes that were left behind by people that didn't survive, memoirs and stuff like that. But he also uses a lot of like statistical data and a lot of like propaganda stuff. So he looks at the propaganda. What were they saying? Why were they saying that? How does that correspond with everything that we actually see, the numbers? And he paints a very realistic picture, and it's almost worse than you thought it was. Like, we have a pretty dark appreciation for what was happening in the Third Reich, but it gives it a more realistic thing. So if you're looking for something to read, it's not dense. It's easy to read. It is a history, but it's probably one of the best histories of World War II I've read. So
groovy.
Yeah.
Next one I might suggest in our list here would be Range: Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World by David Epstein. Epstein, maybe. Sorry if I butchered that.
Didn't he not kill himself? No.
Different guy. Range is awesome because I think it sort of points out the value of like diversifying your abilities and your core skill sets, not for the sake or purpose of doing a specific thing or achieving a specific reward, but it shows the benefits like in all types of different avenues in industry, or whether it's sports and athletics, or CEOs and market traders or programmers or whatever. No matter what you do, you're better at that if you know a bunch of other things as well. And it sort of goes into detail with examples of a lot of like key figures, including like Tiger Woods and some race car drivers and famous traders and stuff like that on the markets. I can't remember the names off the top of my head. Memory is not my forte, but
why don't I might read that and then we could do a podcast on it, because I actually been wanting to talk about generalization.
Oh, we absolutely should.
Because you can't, like, video game, if you want to make a video game, you cannot specialize. You have to know a bit of everything.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to like write a story even, or if you're going to be a journalist. Like any type of industry actually requires, as long as you're not on a factory production line, any other job require like higher education, but education for specific training is not exactly helpful if you're trying to build a game about history and know nothing about history, or if you're trying to build a game about sports and know nothing about sports. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that one's a good one. Okay, I've got a whole like bunch of tabs here from your recommendations that now I'm going to use. So
I'm trying to write yours down as we go. But I don't think I can read those big books that you read.
Oh, I got a few small ones here, some very small ones.
By the time I get to the next chapter, I forget everything from before.
Here, I'll pick a small one. Let's go with George Orwell. So anything by George Orwell, especially his nonfiction. Road to Wigan Pier is a good place to start. Also, but I don't have it, Down and Out in Paris and London's good. Both of these books are pretty much him being, what's it like for the poor? And then instead of just going to talk to them, he goes and lives with them. He works with them. He just says to his wife, I'm going to go live with the poor in Paris and London. And in Northern, this one is after that, where he goes and lives in Northern Britain a bit and lives with the poor and lives with them. He does scrimshaw with them. He coal mines and realizes that he's terrible at it. He works on the docks. He works at a restaurant in Paris, which will make you never want to eat at a restaurant ever again, because it kind of felt like a lot of stuff I was doing in a restaurant.
Is that like a Tale of Two Cities kind of vibe or what?
No, it's this. They are Down Out in Paris and London is fictional based on his experiences, because he didn't want to like out anybody. Yeah. But this one is, they're very much kind of like reporting. Here's what it's like for the poor people. They only eat one piece of bread a day and have no teeth. Did you know that? No. Well, now you do. I've lived with them. And there's a lot more to them than you think. They're not just, the poors. And it really gives you, again, a more realistic representation of what it was like to be poor. And he being a very much a champion of the poor and the lower class, George Orwell wrote with that in mind, and to stop the oppression of the poor. And so he went and fought in the Spanish Civil War, and then realized, which is Amish Catalonia, which you should also read, which is disenfranchisement with communism. And then he came back and said, okay, I'm writing 1984 now. And so all of his books leading up to the war, his earlier books are fascinating, like absolutely fascinating. Read all of them. I can't pick one.
I guess along that vein, one of the only books that I managed to hold on to, I might recommend my book, Emergence Latour et Emergo.
Do it. Can I read Kris's book? It's a good book.
So it's sort of like a philosophical introspective, following the life of a teenager. So it's fictional, but again, it's representational of actual events. But the point of it was mostly to be a poetic sort of treatise towards introspection itself. And it's very postmodern, so it's not much of Jordan's cup of tea, but it does feature a feature-length album that's written and recorded in the voice of the protagonist. So
I don't know if it's postmodern, because you're not critiquing yourself too much.
It's meant to without doing it, though, without saying so explicitly.
You're critiquing yourself, but you're not like, I don't know, it still had meaning to it. And so
hopefully.
Yeah. I liked it. I kind of want to go back and like make sure all the commas are in the right place, but
Hey, feel free to edit it, man. I'll put your name on
it. Edited by this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. Where do I want to go next? I think I'm gonna dive into something a little different. Mysticism, maybe. Anything by Hermann Hesse. But specifically Siddhartha. If you read Steppenwolf, realize that the character of Steppenwolf is not cool. He's actually the bad guy. But Siddhartha, I've brought this up so many times. It helped me actualize my own enlightenment path in a way. Kind of says like you kind of have to find your own path. But that being said, in order to understand the book, you have to read it yourself. So go ahead and read it. It's about a person that's living in the time, Siddhartha, who's living in the time of Buddha. And he goes and actually meets Buddha and finds that Buddha can't teach him nothing. Buddha's like, yeah, obviously. And then he goes on his own path of enlightenment and finds the true meaning of his life. Kind of, sort of. It's not really that, but go read it, see what it means for you.
Next on my list, it might be Samuel Stein's Capital City, Gentrification and the Real Estate State. It's a book that kind of, well, he coins a bunch of terms. So he explains how like city planning and area zoning and things like that actually affect culture and society and peoples itself. He calls it sort of like the rip-off economy or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's important because every city, like every developed city, not like boony towns and stuff like that, but developed cities are very much constructing the types of poverty and income disparity gaps and wage declining, or well, I guess purchasing power decline of the common folk. And if you're more than, if you're part of the 70% of the population that applies to, then it's probably in your best interest to vote with this type of information in mind. So it's a really good perspective. It's not entirely accurate or perfect or anyway, but no subjective opinion piece ever is. But there's enough detail and information in there for you to form your own opinions based on the research he's done anyway. So it's very useful. And I think it cites examples like the Chinatown in San Francisco and Harlem and the Bronx and stuff in New York. So it's got some really deep and important matters, and it's not too heavy for people who aren't into markets or politics.
Okay.
Again, I'm trying to make most of my books are chosen to be accessible.
Mine, a lot of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them are just going to be weird.
Yeah, I got a bunch in there too. Or a few.
Okay. Let's see. Where do I want to go next? Do I want to, you know what? I brought this one up a lot and I thought it would be good because I think it's actually a good one. Oh, Kris is leading. Let's do Lukianoff and Haight's Coddling of the American Mind, which is such a divisive title, but essentially they get into how our culture is changing and how it's changing us. And we complain about this a lot in in our education episodes, where a lot of, they talk a lot about the consequences of participation awards and participation credits, and also the influence of social media on our youth. And I actually tend to bring it up quite a bit. So maybe instead of just taking my word for it, go actually give it a read, see if you agree with him or not. It's not a right-wing propaganda piece. Jonathan Haidt is probably one of the more left-leaning guys that I listen to regularly. So,
but he's a pragmatist too. Like he's not radicalized or anything.
No, he just wants people to stop shooting themselves from what they see on social media.
Yeah.
So,
my next recommendation would be a couple, sort of lumped them together, but I'll start with Plato's Timaeus and Critias. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but anyway, one of those Penguin classics or whatever. It's a criticism of Socrates' ideal state. So I guess that was mostly from Plato's Republic, or other ideas of like, just social organization and stratification of class systems and things like that, and rights. But in doubling up with that one, I'll also suggest Beyond Good and Evil, which we talked about in another episode, so I don't really need to go in depth. But
yeah, but I only covered,
always worth the read.
I only covered a minuscule part of that. There's so much in Beyond Good and Evil that
it's a small book, but you can take forever to read it if you want to.
And you can you can focus, like we laser focused on a couple passages and got like 2 hours out of it.
Yeah, we spoke 2 hours about 2 sentences.
Okay, so I'm gonna get a bit into fiction now. I got a bunch of fiction here. I guess let's do C.S. Lewis, just because Christian holiday. You might as well read a Christian book. And C.S. Lewis is, even if you're an atheist, there's meaning in this. There's stuff you can learn about this. It's, if you haven't read it, read anything by C.S. Lewis, specifically The Abolition of Man and Mere Christianity was really good. But this one is a good starter to get into C.S. Lewis. If you have just like Chronicles of Narnia was for kids, this is really not for kids. But it's a story of a junior devil asking in correspondence with a senior devil about how he should be tempting and corrupting a man. And this is set during World War II. So you watch the attempts to corrupt this man and then the general grace of this, spoilers, of this man who the devil fails to tempt. But he in doing this, because C.S. Lewis is one of the most brilliant people of the 20th century, up there with people like his best friend Tolkien. They were friends? Oh, they were best buds. They used to go to movies together. I think there's a story of them going to like Disney movies and them both just sitting in the audience going, this is a terrible story. Like, don't they could tell they could be doing so much more with this. Like, they just thought Disney would, like, just like we huff about movies today, they were huffing about Disney then. So yeah, remember, just because it's old doesn't mean you have to look at it through rose-colored glasses. But this one is really good. There's a lot in there, and there's more in there than you think, because he definitely discusses what is moral, what is immoral, what is evil, what is good, and it's a lot more nuanced than you think. And he definitely, I'd say C.S. Lewis really does give the fairest argument for Christianity since like Jesus. Okay, that's maybe hyperbole, but he definitely does a good job. So
all right, well, in keeping with that theme, my next recommendation I think is going to have to be J.A. Morrison's Martin Luther, the biographical and sort of not just strictly biographical, but it's just a biography. But it's interesting because they go into depth in the mindset of Martin Luther and like the approach and what inspired him and drove him, like right down from like the family level, and then education and his background in the community and things like that, and then his belief systems through the church. So it wasn't just like he did this, which a lot of biographies are, but highly recommended. Can't recommend it enough for the Christians and atheists alike.
My next one's actually for another book written by a Catholic priest. I don't know if he was an apostate at the end, but he definitely was critical of the Catholic Church to some extent. And this is one of my favorite books ever, and I never talk about it because it's just never comes up. A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter Miller. It's actually a science fiction book. It's kind of like Fallout, if Fallout was written by a Catholic and had good writing.
What's Fallout?
Like the video games.
Oh, I never played them.
No.
What are they about?
They're pretty famous.
Yeah, I know they're famous, but what are they about?
They're like post-apocalyptic. You wander around a wasteland.
Oh, okay.
And there's like quests and stuff. So this one's set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and it focuses on an abbey in probably Colorado, around that area, the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. And their job is to save and protect and preserve ancient texts and technology. So you can wonder why I like this right off the bat. So this group, but they treat it as a religious observance. The Abbey of I can't remember. It's been a while, but this abbey was Blessed Saint Isaac Leibowitz, and so the abbey is the main focus, and there's 3 stories in it, and one of the stories is, it's the height of the wasteland, everything's terrible, and there is just everyone's just trying to survive, and they rediscover light, the light bulb, and it's this mystical thing that they've rediscovered from their teachings. And then the second story is set during kind of like a Roman period where they're starting to get city states coming back up again. There's an empire consolidating its power, and they're built up in the politics. And the third story is when the knowledge of the abbey has been used for to create a new modern world that is threatened by the same nonsense that threatens our world today. So, and all through this are talks of theology, morality, and Christianity, which are actually just, it's one of the best books I've ever read.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I guess in reflecting from what from your last recommendation there, I'm going to pick well, I'll start with Great Dialogues of Plato. Can't go wrong with that. And again, morality, rights, justice, virtue, emotions of all sorts. And tied to that, I would say Homer's Iliad. If you're looking for something that's like story driven, but also deeply metaphorical and very much the a brain. Oh, I don't want to censor myself. A brain meld.
I found the Iliad. I went on a massive Iliad kick a couple of years ago, and I treated it like the Bible.
It's so hard to read, but it's so deep. Like when you stop and consider all the symbolisms and metaphors and sort of apply them, like what kind of book starts with arete?
Yeah.
Single word. Oh, it's brilliant.
Actually, the thing that got me into this actually is a good transition here, but like the Iliad and the Odyssey, there's a lot more in there than you think. I guess read Bullfinch's mythology if you want to have more things.
Oh, that's on my list.
We'll get to that. Actually, probably do that one after this one. So the thing that got me into the Iliad was 2 books by Dan Simmons, and everything by Dan Simmons is great because he's weird. And I've talked about this a couple times, but Ilium and Olympos by Dan Simmons. Where do I get this in frame? I recommend this to everybody ad nauseum because it's just the weirdest and best thing I've ever read. They are thick, but it'll be hard to put down because just.
Is Ilium meant to be a pun?
No, Ilium is no. The thing is Ilium is literal. So the plains of Ilium, which is Troy, which is the Greek word for Troy. Everyone had a different name for it.
Troika.
And so it's literal because Ilium is actual place. The book starts and you're in the Iliad, and this guy Dan Simmons obviously has read it more than I have, but he's also read more Proust and Shakespeare, and he melds them all together in a very literal fashion. There's historians who are there because the gods put them there, the literal gods put them there to watch the unfolding of the battle at Troy, and and it all goes wrong when some of the other gods come and mess things up, and their political infighting between the gods is good, but there's also Caliban, the Shakespearean monster from The Tempest, shows up. There's 2 androids trying to get to Earth from Jupiter.
That's so random.
Who argue Proust the entire time they're on their journey.
Random.
Oh, it's so random, but it is so good. And
it sounds like it'd be a great cartoon.
Oh yeah, if they made this into like an anime, then that'd be great. but it's so weird. Also, his Hyperion cantos are also great, but weird, where he takes Canterbury Tales and makes it into a science fiction story. And but Dan Simmons is an amazing writer, and I found it hard to put those down at all because it was just so fascinating. So
my next recommendations are going to get really, really serious, so I'll lump a couple together too for that. Okay. Norman Finkelstein, An Issue with Justice: Origins of the Israel-Palestine Conflict. And it's from the perspective of a New York Jew, Norman Finkelstein, who's also a very astute scholar. He's one of those reclusive types that just studies, like 24/7 his entire life. But if you read his early stuff, he's kind of like radical left, and then he progressed and changed his mind on a lot of issues later on. So don't just judge his opinion or his views based on one thing that you've read from him, because he's got dramatically different approaches depending on the points of his life.
I remember some of his early stuff. He'd like end his speeches with, "Just to tell you, I'm a radical communist and the revolution is coming." I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, and it's a lot to do with his background and upbringing that radicalized him, right? So we can all sort of identify or relate to that to some degree, varying degrees. But my next suggestion or recommendation would be Ludwig von Mises' Omnipotent Government: The Rise of the Total State and Total War. Von Mises is a brilliant thinker and writer. Again, I don't always agree, but it's really nice to have a fresh and well fleshed out, thought out opinion on matters that are pertinent even today.
Mises is next on my audiobook list. He's already in my phone. Everyone keeps talking about him. He's like, it's like society's rediscovering Mises right now.
I haven't heard anybody ever mention him ever. Like
I've only heard people mention him in the last 6 months, because everyone's just so sick of all this, Frankfurt School. That's neither here nor there. Okay,
I think it was George Bush and the war in Iraq and stuff like that got me into reading that type of stuff, because it was it was unconscionable to me that nobody in my generation was even thinking or reading about stuff that was actually happening. And everybody just seemed completely blind to the fact that there's an economy of war out there, and power and totalitarianism is still a real threat. It's not just something that happened to people in the past. So it's important to know.
Okay, so I think I've got 2 more book recommendations, but I'm going to stay in the Middle Ages. And my one is Umberto Eco and The Name of the Rose. This is one of my favorite authors ever. Every time I read one of his books, it sits in my soul for like a month. And The Curious Flame of Queen Loana, still, whenever I think about the book, just haunts me. But this one was probably one of his more famous ones. They made a movie of it, which actually wasn't a bad one. But essentially, this is the best retelling of the Zadig myth, which turned into the what do you call that? What's the guy? Sherlock Holmes kind of thing. So there's this what's his name? There's this monk. His name is Brother William of Baskerville. So you know exactly he's not playing games. This guy is supposed to be Sherlock Holmes, and he's essentially a critical thinker in the Middle Ages. So this is
Baskerville.
Yeah, as in like Hound of the Baskervilles. He's not playing. He doesn't care. He's
not mincing words about it.
No, he's like, this is a mystery, and he's talking about critical thinking. That's what this book about. This book is about thinking, and he contrasts this character, and it's told from the perspective of the character's attendant, this boy who follows him around as little friar, and there's a murder mystery at the Abbey of something or other. There's another Abbey. So everyone
Abbey in the Downton.
Yeah, the Downtons. No, but it takes place in a time where everyone's ignorant, where everyone doesn't think, where they say just Deus vult. Oh, I said this because God says it. I am the voice of God because I am the leader of the Benedictine Inquisition. And he's a scholar of the Middle Ages, so he's got a very good understanding of the nature of what these institutions back then were. And it is definitely a compare and contrast between critical thinking and poor thinking. But at the same time, it's just a really good story because Umberto Eco is a great writer. I recommend anything by Umberto Eco, especially like Foucault's Pendulum, which is about Foucault's pendulum, but it's about lying and honesty and how conspiracy theories will end up hurting only yourself and only causing damage and do no good. But this one is probably his most famous work. Read the book, watch the movie. The movie's actually good. And they actually find an abbey that has the same layout as the one in the book. So I don't know how they did. And in the movie, actually, the guy who made it went and actively looked for people that were just as ugly as possible for like a lot of the characters, except for a couple of them who were supposed to be attractive, like the friar boy. And because he realized that like everyone in the Middle Ages was ugly or more ugly.
It happens from being a peasant.
Yeah. And then there's Sean Connery. So Sean Connery was in the movie. So, but anything by Umberto Eco, but start within the Name of the Rose. And if you like it, branch out from there. So he's deep and he's Italian. So it's a bit different than something that you're used to.
And if for a more contemporary political perspective, bouncing off of sort of medieval ages, what was I? Oh yeah, Marching Toward Hell, Michael Schur. No, that's not the one. It's A Hill to Die On that I was thinking of. Where is that one? I can't remember who wrote it. There's two people who wrote that one.
It was written by Jesus.
I thought I put it on my list, but apparently I did. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So The Hill to Die On, The Battle for Congress and the Future of Trump's America by Jake Sherman and Anna Palmer. Mm-hmm. It's almost funny how ridiculous but serious, like even the House of Congress and the House of Representatives and like people like Paul Ryan especially, but everybody in that sort of cohort that conspired towards Trump for the sake of power and for the sake of tax relief on their businesses and money and like the tax what do you call that, his tax reform with air quotes. Mm-hmm. But so that would be huge. And then to follow that up, I'd also suggest again, which I can't recommend highly enough, is Henry David Thoreau's Civil Disobedience, because that's the perfect counter plug to The Hill to Die On.
You do have to take Thoreau with a bit of a grain of salt, but you have to read him.
Even for his time, like if he had wrote this today, I would still be impressed by how accurate his assessment of media and its influence on culture and people and politics is, especially with respect to like war or finance, like fiscal jurisprudence and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. But definitely Thoreau had a big influence on a lot of my stuff. I don't agree with him on actually very much anymore. But I'm glad I read him, and I like pick him up every once in a while.
We'll have to do an episode on Thoreau then, because I can't imagine how you disagree with very much of what he says.
I don't agree with some of the his conclusions in Walden. That's what I'm mostly talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even read Walden. I read all the other his essays and stuff like that on political dissent, mostly.
So Civil Disobedience is, maybe I'll read it again. I don't think I remember.
I should check out Walden.
I
keep meaning to, and I don't.
Walden's is definitely his one. His first 5 chapters are just called Economics. It's just like, I'm not even giving a shit. One of the things I don't like about him is that he's like, you don't need to read. Reading is useless. And I was just like, listen, Thoreau, you're going to have a problem.
I think he was being ironic because he reads and writes constantly.
Well, in that book, yeah, I know, right? In that book, he only brings, I think it's a Shakespeare play, and he said, I didn't even need that. And I was just like, listen, buddy.
He does have a sense of humor like that, though. He says things that are like obviously contrary to his own opinion because it's supposed to be like a, yeah, sure, like sarcasm type of thing.
Yeah.
But I guess that's not always clear either.
Never mind. mind. I've got 2 more books. All right, which one do I want to go with? Future or present? Past. Okay, so let's go with computers. I'm going to go with Walter Isaacson's The Innovators. This coupled with How Innovation Works by Matt Ridley really will show you how innovation actually happens. Because this is the story. He wrote a biography of Steve Jobs too, but I don't really care about Steve Jobs all that much.
Yeah, me neither.
But he does a great history of computing from the Babbage engine, the Babbage analytical engine, the Jacquard loom, all the way up to, where does he end here? This was written in 2014, all the way up to, come on, the internet, essentially. So the creation of the internet and the proliferation of, I think, like a lot of the modern stuff. So this is he goes from, counting machines, microchips, vacuum tubes, Turing's in here, all the people in here. And this actually helped me quite a bit with my thesis because, I was talking about computers. But this, if you want a good and concise history of computing, this is probably one of the better places to go. And it's very accessible. He's not writing for, stuffy historians like me. He's writing for people who want to learn about the history of computing. And not all of his books have this, very austere cover. So don't let it scare you away. It's a great work, and I've read it twice probably.
Well, bouncing off that, I guess I would suggest Clayton M. Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma. And I've got too many on my list here, so I'm just going to start adding a couple together.
I've only got one more book, so.
Okay, Rory Sutherland's Alchemy, The Surprising Power of Ideas That Don't Make Sense. So it's a lot of it's about like the things that people believe without thinking and the things that people don't think about that they should because they don't have specific or well thought out beliefs. So they do kind of go together if you look at them from an existential or a background, higher perspective, higher order point of view. And Joel Cotlin's got a book called The Coming of Neo-Feudalism. That book is an excellent portrayal of like comparing and contrasting today's modern society to feudal societies and suggesting that the issuance of credit and debt and the prevalence of income disparity and things like that are actually sort of forming the exact same, fundamentally same system of like ownership of property and subjugation of the people who need the property to subsist.
But Kris, inflation is good for poor people and bad for the upper class. Haven't you heard?
Yeah, see our episode on inflation.
That's the episode on inflation, definitely recommended because they just came out with stats about how much inflation there was in America in the last year.
And that's downplayed like a lot. They've been juking the stats by changing
and they keep saying
metric.
stuff like, Biden just came out with like saying like, oh, we're so good with our money, I'm going to take out more debt. It's like, whoa.
But you know what? The Federal Reserve was just interviewed yesterday, the chairman of the Fed, and he said that they should think about having a crypto dollar, like a digital dollar. And don't worry, we'll manage it properly and we'll be prudent and we'll have it well regulated and there'll be lots of oversight. And I'm like, the reason you need a crypto dollar is because you've destroyed your own dollar by not having regulation and oversight. So it's just so ironic that it came from the words of the mouth of the chairman of the Fed like yesterday.
I'm getting more pessimistic. So if you'd like to donate to the channel, please send us Bitcoins.
And then just quickly, I'll throw in George Soros' The Alchemy of Finance, because that's like an epic all-time. If you don't know anything about economics, you can learn everything that they don't tell you all in one book.
Didn't George Soros just get arrested or something?
I doubt it. He's got more money than the government with the police. You can buy countries, literally. He has like tens of billions of dollars, not just like 1 or 2 billion, but like 100 billion. I think he's got a couple $100 billion just in managed, assets under management. Maybe even $1 trillion by now. Soros assets under management. I'm just going to check quickly because I'm curious. He reported to have his firm had 27.9 billion in assets under management, ranked the 6th institutional hedge fund on the 100 list. That was back in 2011.
Hedge funds.
Which was a lot of money back then because we didn't talk with B's, we talked with M's at the time.
Yeah. Well, now we're talking about T's to go get some bread at the store.
Yeah, like Apple's pushing towards a $3 trillion market cap. Like absolutely insane. Last year, there was no companies ever that were 1 trillion. Now there's like 3 of them that are pushing for 3 trillion. Like,
oh yeah. I think we're getting off topic. Changing topic is my next book. I sound like I'm like channeling LeVar Burton here from Reading Rainbow. So mine is, and this is required reading for all of you. This is a Swerve by Stephen Greenblatt. I read this book and then went and read every single other book Stephen Greenblatt read because he talks a lot about Shakespeare, and I don't know, he's just a great writer. So this one is it's a weird book, and it's actually kind of fascinating because he talks about the history of another book, which is De Rerum Naturae, which is the nature of things, which is kind of a critique of Stoicism, but it also acts as a proto-scientific method and view of the world. And it was a competing philosophy with Stoicism in the Roman period. And
so it's kind of like a way of thinking too, right?
Yeah.
Not just like what it is, but like how to do it.
Right. And it's a very scientific way of thinking. But De Rerum Naturae is written as a poem by Lucretius, who was a Epicurean. And so he goes into the philosophy of Epicurean, he goes into the philosophy of Lucretius, and then he goes into the history of the book itself and how it was almost lost and was accidentally discovered by a guy in a monastery in Central Europe, and the guy who discovered it didn't actually ever end up reading it. And that's the only reason we know about De Rerum Naturae, is because of the story that's in this book. And he goes into how important of a book it is, and how important of a book it was, and how it the influence it had on things like the Enlightenment, on people like Descartes, Locke, Hobbes and Kant, and all the early Renaissance thinkers, once it got disseminated, and how the backlash on this book created like a scrubbing of the history, kind of propaganda wise, of the Epicureans. So you hear Epicurean, they think, oh, they're just hedonist, and I'm an Epicurean. I go and you just
overindulge in everything.
Drugs qua drugs, sex qua sex, and it's just like, no, it's not like that at all. Epicureanism is actually just, you were living your life, you were the one living it, enjoy it. How do you enjoy it? With drugs? No.
It's an emphasis on appreciation, though.
It's appreciation
of the senses,
the good things in life.
Yeah.
Like family and friends and being moral. And so it gets into this, and it really is a very good expose of ancient and modern thought. I'm just hitting my mic here. So
I'll rapid fire off some physics books, because I think nothing better in the last 10, 20 years than the way our physicists have been projecting and conveying information that's usually reserved for the theoretical physicists or PhDs or whatever.
And then let's get into shows or movies.
Yeah, I'm just going to do rapid fire on these books first. Sean M. Carroll, read anything by him, especially on time and entropy, and
he's got a way of explaining stuff that's just like, oh.
Yeah, and Brian Cox wrote a book called Why Does E Equals MC Squared, and he also does a whole bunch of documentaries and shit. Like, he's phenomenal purveyor of science. Brian Greene, The Hidden Reality. He also did what's it called? The Spectacular Universe or the Wonderful Universe, something like that. But he's got a whole series, and Brian Greene also hosts the World Science Festival, which is like panel debates and discussions with experts that they run like every year, except for during COVID, they didn't do very much. But those are terrific. All of his books are terrific. Richard Feynman, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, is fantastic. And then one that's completely unrelated, but I had to add it in, is Trevor Aronson, The Terror Factor Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terrorism. And again, that's just political awareness. I think everybody should read it. So we'll skip.
All right. So For this section is probably going to be a bit shorter. I've only got 2 recommendations because everyone's kind of a little more plugged into TV and movies. Then I think we'll move on to music, which I'm going to be very quiet on because I love music, but not as much as some of you guys. So
most people won't like my tastes anyway, so we'll probably.
You know what? You changed my mind on a lot of stuff. I was just like, I don't know if I like this, and I listened to it. I'm like, I like this. So,
but they're so few and far between, though.
Let's see here. So my first recommendation for viewing. Let's see here. None of these are really, neither of mine are going to be very like accessible and maybe actually hard to find. My first one's going to be the thing I bring up all the time, and my favorite show in the world is Babylon 5.
Oh,
because it's kind of like Star Trek. It's a little more realistic. The humans are humans, and they treat the characters right. There's a 5-year arc that comes to a nice, satisfying, yet emotionally devastating conclusion. And you're somehow rooting for even the bad guys. And it's campy. The acting's really shoddy in parts. The CGI does not hold up too well. The ships are still awesome. The music is great. But for its time, and you really enjoy following people on this horrible journey that they're going on. Plays off of themes for everything from Shakespeare to Lord of the Rings to 20th century movies. So it's really just a hidden gem. And my only thing about it, you do have to get through the first season, but there's a lot of foreshadowing in the first season that really pays off. You don't know they're foreshadowing until it happens in like the 4th season. You're like, whoa, that's the thing. And so you end up doing that a lot. And there's just so much character development. You don't know where the character is going to go. You literally do not know where the character is going to go. And when they get there, it's tragic and wonderful for every character. I can't recommend it enough. Maybe skip the movies except for in the beginning, but that's
Did you watch the movies or the show first?
Oh, you watched the show. Go find a chronological order on Reddit if you're really interested. There's only like 1 episode I'd say to skip. No, 2, and they're both in the first season. One of them's a boxing episode that has there's no reason for it to be there. So that's my first show recommendation.
Mine, I guess in line with yours, for that one I'll pick out The Expanse, because I think that show's starting up again, so everybody should be watching the new season. But if you haven't already watched it, you should definitely go into that series. Not only is it entertaining, but they do a great job of all the little things, like throwing in accents or using the names of real asteroids and moons of other planet. It's sci-fi, sorry, if you're not aware. But they also they consult a lot with physics, astrophysicists in their show, so they try to make it as realistic as possible, even though it's very sci-fi and it's got the alien element or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that I think both of the shows did, and the books for The Expanse were great too. We said we were done, but both of the shows have this thing where the humans have to obey all the laws of physics as we know it. The aliens can do whatever nonsense magic they want. Yeah. But both of the shows, because Babylon 5 does this thing where all of the fighters, you have like Star Wars where they're just pretty much World War II fighting, but in Babylon 5 they have like, you'll see the fighter and it'll come up, but then it'll keep its inertia and cut its acceleration and just and then cut it, and then so it can like do a strafing run, so it'll just keep going with its inertia. And they'll do a bunch of stuff like that. And The Expanse did it even better.
Whereas the old time, they tried to make them fly through space as if they were flying with fluid dynamics and stuff like that, or aerodynamics.
So, The Expanse was good. I guess my turn. Yeah. So this one's going to be from me and my wife. because we just binged it, and I've been telling you guys I've been binging it, is The Legend of Galactic Heroes. It will
was
ruin.
A great recommendation from you. You got me on that one.
Yeah, nothing is as good as this. It will ruin all other anime for you forever. It's a sweeping sci-fi epic, kind of reminiscent of old like shot and ball epics, but it's in space. So there's space Prussia essentially versus space America Republic, and you follow these two empires as they are locked in this like war, while smaller parties like a capitalistic city state and some religious nut jobs who are worshiping Earth itself are, trying to control things behind the scenes. And it seems a bit over the top at times, but it's really not, because people can be that stupid and people can be that competent. It's not. And every once in a while, it reminds you that war is one of the worst things that humans can do to each other. But the entire time they're fighting, they'll be arguing like what it means to live in a republic or in a free state, what it means to live, what ambition means in an authoritarian regime, what it's like for the small people, what it's like for what are the consequences of needless war and stupidity in battle. And it really does this while having these epic space battles, some of the most epic stuff you'll ever see. And the reason it's epic is that the entire soundtrack is classical music.
That's probably the best part to it too.
The first season is heavy on Mahler. I was hooked by episode 15 when they just take Dvorak's Ninth Symphony, the fourth movement, and they just play it from beginning to end for the first half of the episode to this giant invasion that's happening. And I was just like, I can't say anything. It's just too good. It's hard to find. You have to pirate it pretty much. Don't watch the new one that came out. The story isn't as nuanced and the designs aren't as cool.
But they do all these little dialogue sessions to show you and get you into the character before they die. You know what I mean? They're real that you really get a sense and an attachment to the character, and then you show what happens to him from just the brutality of war. Everyone
gets a name. Everyone who shows up, oh, this is Sergeant so-and-so, and you might not see him again, but he'll still get a name.
And here's the ex-wife that was left behind because they had to break up, and he wanted for her to have a new life and not to be attached to him because he knew he wasn't coming back. They show you this whole progression towards it's really
also
well
this
done.
Show will destroy you. No spoilers, but it's worse than Game of Thrones for I hope you like that character. What's your favorite? Oh well, shame.
Since we're getting a bit slow, I'm gonna double up on a couple more than movies. I think I'm gonna recommend just HBO series and stuff, those drama series that are just really highly produced in Hollywood and things like that. So The Wire and Peaky Blinders would be my number 1 and 2 on that.
Okay, Peaky Blinders is actually good.
Oh,
I keep seeing it on Netflix, which makes me go, ugh. So
no, honestly, the name is stupid, but until you actually start watching it, and it's based on real history of a London gang that used to put razor blades in their caps, so that's why they're the Peaky Blinders.
Okay,
blind you with their caps. But it's it's so Scorsese-esque, just the tones of the directing and the dialogue and the writing, the scripting, and everything about it is just written out like it was meant to be a movie, but there was just too much in it, so they made a whole bunch of movies as a series.
It doesn't get Game of Thronesy like everyone wants to be nowadays.
It's better than Game of Thrones, hands down. Not even close.
I was saying to my wife today, the only good season of Game of Thrones was season 1.
Well, season 1 through 3, I guess, but yeah.
Well, one thing, aside, but one of the things that I liked about it is that in the first season, they're telling stories to each other. They're just standing around telling stories to each other. And that stopped after the first season. because they did exposition to each other. I remember that time that explains what's about to happen in 4 scenes really well and puts context to everything we're doing. Well, I'm going to tell you about that. And they're just sitting around talking to each other and everyone's just like, this is the best thing ever. And then they stop telling each other stories.
Like they stop with the lore and then they just start with magic out of nowhere. And they don't even try to give you any foreshadowing or help you guide you along. But in anime though, Phantom, Requiem for a Phantom is an awesome miniseries. And Kenshin is the best anime I've ever seen.
Kenshin, both of us grew up on Kenshin.
Yeah.
A lot of, even our philosophy started from Kenshin. It's like, you don't need to change the world, but you can change everything in your immediate vicinity. And that's something. And don't kill people.
The Comey Rule and Billions has got a new season coming out. Comey Rule was just a short miniseries, but again, based on actual events and very well produced, very well directed, extremely well written. And The West Wing, everybody knows The West Wing. Gomorrah is an Italian gangster thing. So if you're into Peaky Blinders and Scorsese type movies, Gomorrah is like an Italian version of that. And it's based off of, or it's not based off of, but it's an extension of like a side plot of another, or a spinoff. That's the word I was looking for, of The Immortal, which is a really famous action movie. So one of the characters from that and the actor from that actually is in Gomorrah as well.
I think
also a Netflix thing.
Yeah, I can't. You mentioned The Wire in passing, but
The Wire's phenomenal. Good.
If you haven't seen The Wire, go watch The Wire. It's like seasons 3, 4, and 5 aren't as good, but no, they're not as good. Caveat, but it's like comparing an A+ to an A.
I think that it's just the focus is different. They're looking at corruption from all these different angles from within the same city. But the fact that they can tie one storyline into like a port industry and the education system and the political system of like city councilors, like the whole thing is just so well intricately interconnected.
Also, the people that were involved in the corruption that they're referencing from the 70s took part in the series itself, which was so cool.
And it's based on a true story too. Like there's actually an Avon Barksdale.
Yeah. Okay, let's
move on to music.
Let's do music. My first recommendation is I'm a literary guy. If you ask me on a date what music I listen to, I'll avoid the question. I'll be like, oh, Mahler's good. Great. I'm not getting married, am I? Look, that's why I dated a musician. All right.
Why don't you start then, just so I don't take any off your list?
Okay. I don't know. I'm gonna get all highbrow and I'm gonna sound all stupid. One of the most I can't even pick one. Let's go with well, I wrote a poem once because Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony just hit me so hard.
Oh, an F minor? Yeah.
It destroyed me, and I was doing a poetry class and I just used it for fuel. And it's just it's heavy on the horns. It's got a heroic first part and then has a destructive second part. Yeah, that. And it's featured prominently in Galactic Heroes too. And so maybe that one, or Beethoven's Fifth was a thing when I was a kid. I just listened to it and I just couldn't stop.
I think I got that one too.
Yeah, it's
Release was my favorite as a kid.
Yeah. So, but modern music, I don't fucking know. Oh, sorry, swearing. Amazing. I don't know. I used to be a punk guy, but I kind of grew out of it. So I don't know. Bad Religion was fun when I was a kid, but it doesn't hit as like it used to.
No, I love Bad Religion. I can't help it. All right. And again, don't be dissuaded by the name. It's not just an atheist. We hate God. Blah blah. It's actually socially conscious and well thought out. And like the lyrics are lyrics. They're not just
surprisingly clever.
Yeah,
especially for punk. But there is that.
A lot of people give that deepity to like Rage Against the Machine and stuff like that, but it's way more than that with Bad Religion, which is nice.
They're raging for the machine now.
So I guess in that type or that genre, I'll go from like punk to metal, I guess, and we'll just work from one genre to another.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for punk, I would say, I guess that's ska, but Goldfinger is one of my favorite ska bands ever, and they're kind of punk in my opinion. But again, punk is all just like a subjective thing.
Go on.
Boxcar Racer is like that guy, George, I think, Tom Belanger from Blink 182. Travis Barker, I think, is still the drummer, who's an amazing drummer from Blink 182, but they're in that. But they also do Angels and Airwaves, which is a more like electronically focused punk, which is really interesting. It's experimental, and it's very personal to them. So it's like emotional type music. I love emotional music. So I definitely recommend that. And along that same vein, I would also recommend Jared Leto's 30 Seconds to Mars, which most people are familiar with now that he's got radio play, but he's been making music since way back in the day when he was doing that movie with Christian Bale, Psycho. He's been a musician for ages. Right. He also did a wicked movie that I didn't mention, Requiem for a Dream. That was a phenomenal movie. Jared Leto's in that. What? He's actually the star of that. Some emo, I would suggest Dashboard Confessions. I don't know why almost nobody listens to them or has heard of them, but Dashboard Confessions is amazing. Harkening back a little bit, sticking with the metal stuff, I would say Megadeth. Cryptic Writings is one of the best albums ever made, like start to finish. It's just brilliance all around. But if you want to go back into like the 70s and stuff, you'd probably have to ask somebody else. But Boston's one of my favorites from back then. Everybody likes Fleetwood Mac, so
I don't like Fleetwood Mac.
No,
I can't stand them.
Oh, I'm not alone then.
Yeah, I think they're overrated and just like you can see that they hate each other in their music. I just can't stand it. Anyway,
if you're looking for something industrial, you can't go wrong with either Trent Reznor, the Nine Inch Nails guy, or Maynard James Keenan, who did A Perfect Circle and Pucifer or Pucifer. I'm not sure how that's pronounced.
Pulsifer?
Yeah, Pucifer. What's the other? Tool. He's the brainchild or the genius behind Tool. Other than that, I would suggest like Paul Banks and Elbow for some sort of melodic and really, really well done experimental, but it's like progressive rock, but not from back in the day. It's like new age sort of alternative progressive rock.
Strange how there was new age and now we're past new age.
Yeah, now we're old.
It's like, what are we doing now? Well, it's post new age. Oh, come on. Just make up a new word.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of hip hop, but I think I'd actually rather just do an episode on hip hop, because it would be too hard to try and recommend stuff that just sounds really harsh or is gratuitously violent or things like that to most people. Wouldn't want to listen to it anyway. So
you gave me Sage Francis a while back, like years ago, and I really liked it. Yeah, I also liked Brother Ali because Brother Ali was actually optimistic. But I listened to Sage Francis again relatively recently, and I was just like, this guy whines a lot. Like, he's so poetic, and that's why I love the hip hop. He was using the genre as poetry, as it's supposed to be, and we'll probably get into this when we talk about it. But I just went back and I found him very pessimistic and cynical, and I was just like,
that's the emotion I love, though. I know when I'm listening to music, I don't really like anything that's uppity, because like I can
Brother
smell
Ali
a flower
because he
if
could
I want to
do
be
that.
happy.
But I like Brother Ali because he could do that. But then he'd also come around on the same album and just be like, yo, we're going to have fun for 2 minutes. Yeah. I'm going to talk about my family and how much I love them. And then
honestly, everything from Rhymesayers, like the record label Rhymesayers from Minnesota or whatever, everything from them is great. Like Greaves has like 6 albums that are some of my favorite albums ever. And he's very instrumental, but he's rap inspired too, but he does a lot of piano stuff and like jazz mixes and things like that. Brother Ali's on the same label as him. Atmosphere is on the same label as him, and he does some really brilliant writing. I don't like his music, but his writing is so good that I listen to him. But other than that, like Tea Party is great. Paul Oakenfold, if you're gonna get into some dance stuff, more like DJ Tiesto if you really want to party hard and balls to the wall. If you want something soft and melodic, like you can't go wrong with Radiohead. And I'm not talking about like new Radiohead. I mean all Radiohead, but especially the Bends. The Bends was the best album, and I don't think most people give it the credit that it's due. Like I think 9 out of 11 songs are just world record type of good.
Yeah. Let's see here. Maybe if I was Megan, my wife, she'd probably say if she was here that you should listen to Morrissey because he's just an anachronism to himself. There's postmodern music. It's beautifully calming voice from the Smiths. And then you listen to the lyrics and you'd be like, this is horrifying. And that's the point. But she loves it. So I'll plug her shit for there.
Something that people probably have never heard, we'll say the Envy Core. I don't think I've ever met anybody that knows the Envy Core, and it's just absolutely phenomenal.
You have not met
the guy's only got
yet.
like 2 albums. It's painful. But I forgot a couple for like experimental rock. Smashing Pumpkins is really, really good. And for something that's soft and brilliantly written, Bob Dylan's son, Jacob Dylan, has solo work, but he also worked on the Wallflowers, which most people know. Wallflowers is a tremendous band. Same with Third Eye Blind. Super good. Way underrated. Third Eye Blind is so good. And everybody can listen to him and get into it. But it's also like socially conscious. They were one of the first to like publicly say F you to Trump when he was running for president. They were like, no, this is such a bad idea. But yeah, not many people spoke out at the time because they weren't sure and they didn't want to look stupid. But Third Eye Blind, they were just like, whatever, this is our opinion, screw it. For more grungy acid type trip hop or whatever, not trip hop, but just, what do they call that? Like acid rock, I guess. Velvet Acid Christ is wicked. They do a whole bunch of like movie quotes and they spin off of other things to like make acid their songs, rock? But it's all, yeah, that's what I was thinking when you came up with the book.
It's like Grateful Dead
it's
stuff.
Instrumental though. It's all just industrial instrumental. It's I love it.
I remember Yes was really good. That was like one of the few bands that I was getting into for a while. Because
I never got into them.
It's just because it was a lot of just experimental stuff, and I remember hearing it in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and being like, what is that? And I'd listen to the whole album. I'm like, I like this. And it's just different. They like were trying to do music. They were trying to use what they had to do music and not try and do what everyone else was doing, which I really appreciated.
Do you recommend any songs or an album or anything by them?
Oh, I don't know.
I should listen to them again. I never gave them a chance. Vertical Horizon and Treble Charger are so good. Again, way underrated in my opinion. Same with the brothers who are in Oasis. Noel Gallagher and I can't remember his brother's name now. Something Gallagher.
Wonderwall.
I can't remember his name now. Anyway, yeah, they both have side projects and independent projects. Apparently there was like a feud between them. I don't know if it's still on, but they have like, they're trying to best each other and they come out with some awesome music trying to one up each other. So it's a really neat dynamic that.
Remember in the last episode when I brought up spite as a motivator?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Liam Gallagher is the name I was thinking of. Imagine Dragons are phenomenal too.
I don't have any more music recommendations.
Okay.
Is there any
I'll
other...
end it then just on a few reggae things because everybody needs to listen to some actually good reggae and stop thinking that Bob Marley is reggae. Like it drives me insane. Kabaka
Bob Marley
Pyramid
is the epitome of deepity.
Yeah,
you just need to love more. And everyone's like, whoa.
No, he's just repeating one thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Kabaka Pyramid. Everybody has to listen to Kabaka Pyramid. Damian Marley is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
Kimani Marley is absolutely brilliant. Stephen Marley is absolutely, all of his kids are really, really great songwriters. Bob Marley was not. I said it on record. I said it and I meant it. Massacre is awesome too, but probably a little bit too hardcore for most people, so I'll skip that. Fantan Moja, Mattis Yahoo, Gentleman.
Oh man, I remember Mattis Yahoo.
Yeah.
It's just some random Jewish Jamaican guy.
Yeah.
Like,
and Gentleman's like a German Jamaican guy, so it's kind of along the same lines. But
Mattis Yahoo had like 15 minutes of fame like 10, 12 years ago.
did he?
Yeah, everyone was like, what is this guy? And he was going on playing his stuff on like all the big shows.
Oh,
And
I've
then
never even
everyone
seen
forgot about him. It was just like, what is this guy?
I got a signed LP. He's one of the only people that I ever like bought a vinyl of and got a signed vinyl. I've never paid for vinyl before. It's inferior to CD. I can't deny it.
That is an unpopular opinion.
Only amongst snobs and audiophiles, but like I know my shit. I can go toe to toe with them. If you don't want to fight me, put it in the comments.
I gotta bring my my brother-in-law on because he's like I think he's a vinyl junkie, but he might actually have some decent arguments for vinyl.
Yeah, there are, but they're preferential arguments. They're not actually empirical arguments. You can't say the sound is technically cleaner. All you can say is that it sounds better to me.
It has a texture, which means it adds something. It's like when you go make something lo-fi and it's just for the aesthetic itself.
Yeah, or you use a tube amp with a vinyl, it usually gives people nostalgia, which makes them like the song better. So again, it's a preferential thing. It's not that the song is actually sounding better empirically or statistically, or
it just creates a reaction in a person. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with having a feeling. If it makes you feel good, then obviously it's better to you, but you can't say it's objectively better. It's technically subjectively better, but that's another story. Blind Melon, I just want to throw that in. Okay, I'm done. I could do this forever. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's why I had to truncate myself with the books because these are not my only books. I've got another 3 upstairs. I guess honorable mentions. No, let's not do that.
Merry Christmas. Enjoy the arts. Spend time with your family. Love, peace, and prosper.
Yeah. If you're going to read or watch any of these, share them. Don't just watch them in like secret, insulate, like share your joy with the world and
talk about it.
Have a good Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Are we going to sing a song for them? Are we going to sing Christmas carols for them?
We could say Jingle Balls.
No, that's a bit crass. Let's just say Merry Christmas.
There's a Kevin Smith reference. Bye.
All right. Bye, guys. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.